Colin Agur, and I am an associate professor at the University of Minnesota. It really began with my PhD years, that I had a sister who was working in India as a math teacher at an international school. And before my PhD, where I had been accepted to study something really different, I went to India for a summer, visited her, and this was 2009. And I rode trains around the country, and everywhere I went, I saw things that really I found fascinating. I found people whose small businesses were being transformed because their teenage son had figured out how to rework their customer service using simple feature phones. I found rickshaw drivers who had become drug dealers because of the connectivity they had. I saw businesses being changed. I saw people's lives being changed. And this was before smartphones. This was just feature phones in a country that really didn't have a lot of telecommunications tradition for individual people, landlines, very, very small networks. So to be put into that context and to all of a sudden realize that there's an entirely different way of thinking about telecommunications, that to me was a really revealing, revelatory experience, especially coming from my own background. I think like a lot of Canadians, I grew up with a landline phone attached to the kitchen wall with a super long coiling cord so it could stretch to other rooms. And a mobile phone came later on. We were already accustomed to using phones, landlines, for many, many years. To go to India and to have virtually all people's first telecommunications experience with a mobile phone, it's a different kind of mentality because you're getting connectivity and you're getting mobility all at the same time. So that's how I got into the research. My way in was through developing countries that have far fewer landlines, and they're often liberalizing their sectors. So things are busy, some would say a bit chaotic, but it's a really exciting place to think about the human element of telecommunications, the policy element, and the geographical element in a big complex country like India. Well, there were some trends that were about the technology. This was the beginning of 3G, the arrival of smartphones in rich countries and to a lesser extent in developing countries. To give you a sense of the scale of what was happening in India in terms of infrastructure, there were at the time, I think, about 400,000 towers, cell phone towers across the country. 2/3 of them weren't connected to the electrical grid. They were powered by gas generators. So you can imagine the millions of liters of gas that would be necessary each year, the trucks involved, the risk of theft, people breaking into these things to steal the gas, just the complexity of all of this from an infrastructural standpoint. And there were also things that, right when I went to India, it was when they were phasing out long distance calling within the country, having different zones. And so that again creates a new kind of consciousness that you're making calls across the country for free. So it's opening up all kinds of new businesses, good and bad. It's allowing families to communicate with each other more cheaply and more easily. It was a remarkable period to be thinking about all of these changes and to be there. Well, there's a lot of history that predates me. Of course, there have been people talking about the technology of cellular communications for many, many years. And the devices themselves, we can take them back to, most obviously the brick phone in Wall Street, but even before then, the academic social science approach to it developed kind of gradually over time. Some of it was by people who had worked in an industry and who had also had some kind of training in often sociology, and who would bring some of that theory and some of those methods to trying to understand how users related to these devices that were becoming so ever-present in their lives. And initially, these were kind of one-off conferences in different places. The field itself was quite mobile, right? It didn't really have an institutional home. And so there were these different things happening. And that's when I came along. And so I was a part of kind of the institutionalization of mobile communication. So that's the part that I know best. Well, it's much larger. of course. There are far more people who are primarily mobile communication scholars, people who wrote their dissertations about mobile communication. And there are even people who've written those dissertations under people who themselves wrote dissertations about mobile communication. So it's becoming a more well-developed field in that sense, where you're having kind of multiple generations of scholars. It's also changed because the technology itself has changed. And of course, it's changed because mobile communication has a home. It has a home at a major conference. It has a home in a journal. It has a home in a book series. It has a home in edited volumes. And people around the world are able to gather together once a year at ICA and continue traditions that are now 20 years old. Well, my contributions to the Mobile Communication Division, mine was kind of an unusual story that we had our first meeting together in Puerto Rico to create what was then the interest group, and they needed to have an executive. And people sort of looked around, and James Katz put his hand up and said, "I nominate Colin Agur to be vice chair." And before anybody could say, "Who's Colin Agur?" I accepted and was elected. And so I did not come into the role with big standing in the field. I was in the first year of my postdoc. So sometimes you get someone who's a vice chair or a chair, and they're very established and they have kind of a gravitational pull around them, right? I had to hustle. So I tried to find out everybody at ICA who was doing mobile adjacent or mobile work. So I got the conference programs from the past couple of years. And I just did some simple data scraping to find out, using keywords, who everybody was. And so there were lots of people who were doing mobile work in other divisions, and they hadn't necessarily thought of themselves as mobile communication scholars. So I used data scraping and just a mail merge program to reach out to people individually and to highlight some of their work in the ways that it connected thematically with what we were doing. It was a lot of work, but that's how you build an interest group. Is you find people, because when you're someone like me who didn't have much standing, people aren't going to come to you. You have to go to them. And so I did that. And then when we had conference sessions, I attended every single one of them. Old school, you pass around a notepad, everybody puts their name and email, then you send an email to the group at the end of the day, summarizing the discussion and encouraging people to go to sessions the following day. So lots of, you might call it constituency work. In terms of my own research, I've focused on ethnographic methods and interviews because I'm really interested in these in-depth interactions you can have with users to really understand how they relate to the device, to the network, to the communities, to apps, to business models, and to perceptions of how the device operates. So that, to me, has come from spending a lot of time talking to people in all corners of the world, trying to really be a student and to step into people's lives and work and the context in which they use these devices. So I find those methods are really useful. They're really enriching intellectually. They're slow, but I think they're really rewarding in their own way. Certainly in professions, there are lots of ways that chat apps allow people to get around existing rules and regulations. Think of network-based professions like flight attendants who routinely use WhatsApp to trade favors, give information about important customers, sell concert tickets to each other when somebody's late on a flight. So there are lots of contexts like that in which chat apps can provide ways around, not necessarily in a nefarious way. It can be just for convenience. It could be because the existing methods they have don't work for some reason. So I think that kind of thing, where we're creating these parallel communicative structures to existing modes of communication. When I did that project, this was really about how people use chat apps for work. I think today it's a little harder to disambiguate people's usage of chat apps for work, for study, for play, for life. These have become the everything apps. If you are a journalist in China, you need to have WeChat or you'll be very lonely and you won't have very many contacts. If you're in Korea, you need to have KakaoTalk. There are lots of places like that where there's a single app that really dominates. And For journalists, it's where they source, but it's also where they get to know their friends. It's where they keep up with people. And so these are these kind of multi-purpose spaces that have been created, and they've really become kind of a part of our lives for reasons that go well beyond work. I think we're seeing different apps and platforms specializing in some ways. Think about the role that Discord plays, for example. If you're studying lots of other platforms, Discord is actually a great place to go to find people who talk, often complain about their other work platforms where they spend their time, where there aren't the same internal methods of talking to other workers there. So I think platforms beget platforms, and users will use different ones for different reasons. And we are having more and more platforms in our lives as a result. And the platforms themselves, some of their features and rules continue to change. And so the essence of one platform might change quite a bit over a period of time. Well, I think one thing that has made mobile communication really successful is it is methodologically pluralistic. There are people who come in, like me, who are really interested in talking to users in an in-depth kind of way, interviews, observation, these kinds of things. There are people who come in from different disciplinary backgrounds and who bring, say, a big data approach or other ways of thinking about mobile communication and how users interact with the technology. So by having this kind of pluralistic approach, I think mobile communication has been global, it's been diverse, it's been forward-looking, it's been welcoming, and it's been a really vibrant space. So I think that methodological diversity has been a real asset, and I hope that will continue. There are some changes that are already underway. And one of those changes is about what's being connected by networks. Traditionally, we've thought about networks in terms of people, but we also need to think of them in terms of things that are connected, devices, rings, and fitness trackers, and all kinds of other things that are connected via Bluetooth, RFID, other kind of short field networks. And how these devices interact, not just with us, but with each other, that I think deepens and adds more complexity to what we think about in mobile communication. It's much, much more than just the phone. Another challenge is going to be, like everything else, the arrival of AI and how this is going to affect the content people see, the kinds of advertising they receive, the kinds of notifications they have, and just all sorts of other aspects that have been very human generated until now. So we're going to see, I think, a lot of overlap with human-machine communication in terms of our theory and our methods and some of the questions we're trying to answer. I think it's going to be a really exciting next few years. I think that people are going to have many, many things to think about. Well, I think one of the big questions intellectually is, where does mobile begin and end? In the old days, mobile communication was a pretty distinct thing. You had a phone, and that's what made it mobile. But there's so much content today that used to be on computers and we now use effortlessly on our phones. And so if everything's mobile, then where does mobile end? That's going to be one of the questions to think about. How can mobile communication do that? I hope that in terms of the division, that it continues to be a place that has a nice balance, a harmony between people who really see the place as their primary home. They're really, really mobile communication scholars. They think in terms of devices and networks and mobile comm theory and existing literature, right? But also a lot of people who come from elsewhere who found a second home. And I think the creative synergy that results from that can help answer some of these really interesting questions that await us.